And it's no different than a circus elephant. Catch a baby elephant, tie him up with a rope when he was a kid. He's pulling on it, and he gets to a point where he cannot think this is unbreakable. Now, when it's a full-grown, massive elephant with world strength, they chain it up with a rope, and it doesn't tug on it because it's been mentally trained that rope is not breakable. And yet now it could just snap it if it wanted to, but it doesn't. So people are raised that way. They're seeing the phenomena this way. And so it's very difficult people to bridge that gap. Okay, so now the government on one hand, today is playing a whole different game. So I tell people all the time, the game of disclosure will never go away. I don't care what people think. Well, we're about to hear about it, we're going to do. They're just going to change the rules. Do you want to know that? You know what I'm saying? Is this the disclosure that we truly want? You know,
You're talking about the human race as a collective, because people like you and I and others watching, we're part of the minority.
There you go. But what I'm saying is, but you and I are still part of a minority, but we also sit at the top of a loft of a lot of truth seekers who are still a little different because they want to know. And so do we want that kind of information out there? Because, all right, let me give you another example. We never seen a UFO stop for gas. They never have. Obviously, they got some technology of free energy. Could you imagine what would happen if free energy hit the marketplace tomorrow? As society as we know it would crash globally.
Beyond the forbidden. Coming to you from an undisclosed location, somewhere in the northern hemisphere, waiting out the alien apocalypse. He is armed with a machete and a microphone. Join Michael James as he seeks answers to the paranormal, conspiracies, ancient mysteries, and the occult. Are you ready to trip the fuck out? This is Beyond the Forbidden.
Doing all right, MJ? What's going on? Let's talk about it today.
Man, I've been trying to get you on for a while. I know you're a busy man. You've been telling me, you know, through text and a little bit right before the show, all the projects you got coming down the road and what you're working on. Man, like, I don't know how you do it, because I've been doing this since 2010, podcasting. Like, really, I just started out as audio only, so it was easy, you know, but it's a lot of work involved, man. And with all the things you're doing, a lot of it you're doing yourself. Like, what keeps you motivated, man? Like, doing all these, not just your all the stuff you're doing, but all the interviews and everything else you're doing. Like, what's that spark? You know, like, because, man, you're like, you're on this roller coaster, man, and you're just telling people, get the hell out of the way, I'm coming.
I actually don't do that. I don't tell them to get out of the way. I tell them to bend the knee. So, you know, we kind of go that route. You know, one of the things you have to have in this particular industry, MJ, you know, it's passion. You got to have passion for it. And oftentimes we run, there's a big difference between people who is just interested in the subject. Maybe they want to talk about it a little bit, but when you want to provide content to people or provide information, and what I call it, and of course what we do is more entertainment, information, so I call it infotainment, right? So that takes a whole different you know, enthusiasm for it. You have to want to do it. You got to want to take the ups and downs with this thing, especially when you come across a lot of these stories, whether they could be true, whether it could be false, whether it could be just something made up. You take the blows, and But oftentimes, most fun part is the discovery of what we do, and I enjoy it. Then, as to find a way to make a living, to have fun doing this, making a little money with it, I think it's the perfect world.
I love it, man. It's been a lot of ups and downs over the years. I finally have a great job that I have a lot of time to where it's a little tough right now having almost 1 year old, but it's getting better. But at my schedule with my job, I used to do a lot of shutdown work. I've traveled all over your state, Texas. I've been all over the South, Southeast, and but been through a bunch of relationships, Roger. Like before, me and my wife got together in middle of 2012, but before her, like I've been researching all this ever since I got out of basic training in '06. Like UFOs, I've been always interested in, the paranormal, but other conspiracies, I'm like, man, I just signed my life away, and like, man, I'm talking about all these other, like, what the hell did I just sign up for? I love this country, but I've been through a lot of ups and downs, man, and I know you probably have too. Like, how? What is your friend? What do your friends and family think? Like, with the ridicule factor, or are they embracive with it? Do they let you do you? How do friends and your family treat? How do they respond to your research, your brand now and then back then?
Well, first of all, let's just lay the groundwork. I want to first appreciate you for giving things to our country, helping with what we stand for here. I think we both have our flags here and represent our country there. And then second of all, your biggest courageous moments is having a 1-year-old and going through that. And so once again, we're going to give you the Medal of Freedom Award or whatever we could do, but you earned it going through. But
I'll pay you later, Roger. I'll pay you later now.
It's all good. It's all good. But what happens is when it comes down to the family, MJ, it's a little different because I was raised in more of a Christian home, deep Christian. My mom was Baptist, and so therefore there's just no conversation about anything beyond the Bible, especially beyond the stars themselves. And so having been a kid, that was kind of compressed inside, even though, I had my own UFO experience at some point when I was 12 years old. I saw a UFO here in Dallas. And so I never told anybody about it. It was always my secret, especially growing up in a neighborhood where even a neighborhood bully on the corner wouldn't have told somebody, hey, I saw a UFO last night. His street credit is gone, right? So when you think about ridicule, when you think about what people go through with this phenomena, then it played its havoc, over the years. And then even now beginning to become a UFO investigator. I'm a certified UFO investigator with MUFON. Also, doing several TV shows about this, and you still get part of your family that is just not with what is happening, and they're still looking at this as a joke, or should I say, just to a point where, hey, is this it's just a taboo subject to talk about? So outside of my family, and even, and I'll get into it for your listeners and how I really grew this particular career. I mean, I was married to a woman, a beautiful girl, and I call her the she-wolf. And I was married to the she-wolf, and I couldn't talk about UFOs in my house. I couldn't do it. She was 15 years younger, and she was still really on the tip of the cups of her religious life. And so therefore it was a lot of Bible things in the house, and it was just something she just didn't want to hear about. I had 3 stepsons at the time. So I would stay up watching Ancient Aliens or the History Channel, and sometimes she'll be livid, and I remember when Clubhouse became a hit. I don't know if you're familiar with that or.
Yeah, I never really watched it, but I want to say maybe I heard my wife talk about it.
Clubhouse was an audio app. Yeah.
Maybe I heard her talk about it before. I've heard of it. I never used it or nothing like that. I've heard somebody mention, I think my wife mentioned it before.
Yeah, it was huge. People, when the pandemic hit, a lot of people were at home from work, so they jumped on Clubhouse, where you can have what you call these little clubs and rooms based upon subject matters, and people will hop in and people will get up on stage. And so I was told about it at that time, and I was like, well, maybe I can get on there and talk to 10 or 15 people about UFOs. I don't have nobody to talk to. And so at this point, I get on there and I start a club called, at that time, was Extraterrestrial Evidence. And I remember Clubhouse approving it, and I opened the club up, and I had my first person jump in to join. It was 2 people, and it's like I was excited. Then I had
I know, right? I know. Whenever that first one comes, man, it's like you're on cloud 9, you know. And
man,
then
I got somebody to talk to. We're gonna talk about UFOs 27, 12,
I get it.
plus OT, you know, and hell, they wouldn't come into the room. I was like, okay, fine. So finally, I got about 6, 7 people, and I started my first room, and about 2 showed up, and I'm talking, and I'm like, what? And then all of a sudden, another person joined. Then all of a sudden, I had 100 people join in a week. And I'm like, what? This thing started growing. And it was just, it got to 4,000 or 5,000 people, you know, and every week I will come on and I would do a show, and I would have my little sound box like I have over here. And let me see if I have, and I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to do this thing. And so I would be like, good evening, everyone. This is Roderick Martin, and I want to welcome you to Extraterrestrial Evidence. And today we're going to talk about aliens and blah, 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 blah. And so I would just do my thing, right? And people used to laugh and like, this is just an audio club. Why are you doing that? This is not. And I'm like, well, someday I hope. And sure enough, Clubhouse ran, they wanted to create creators, and they did this creative first program. And they said, well, you know, if you want to create an audio show for us, blah, blah, blah. So I did my little 1-minute thing, you know, I send it in, and sure enough, I get this email and it says, you're a candidate for out of the 5,000. I was like, what? And so I ended up winning the first section, which was to pick 60 people. And I was one of them. They gave everybody $1,000. They sent and said, put on a show for 2 hours. The $1,000 could be used for equipment, babysitters, whatever you need. And then we're going to pick 21 people after that. And I was like, okay, fine. So I'm calling around trying to get people to be on the show. There was other clubs who, you know, at that time, Lou Elizondo, if you heard of him, all these people would come on Clubhouse, and Dr. Stephen Greer. And I would ask them, hey, man, other people, can you get them on the show? I got $1,000 budget. I'll interview them, whatever. None of them. Nope. And so finally, I said, well, I got to do something, you know, I'm up. And there was other clubs, and they was not supportive, MJ, of this thing, right? And they chose him maybe because he was black or whatever. Now, I got chosen because a lot of them didn't submit anyway, too. But yet, okay, I got chosen because I got talent. That's cool. I'm going to give it that.
Very charismatic. That's why I like listening. I don't mean to cut you off, Roger, but I love listening to your interviews, watching your videos.
Gotcha.
Like, you're charismatic, man. And
I appreciate it.
I like that. Like you're good with your wordplay. It's just everything. I don't know. I love the way you present yourself, especially on interviews, man. It's like,
hey,
it's just little. Hold on, don't lose your thought. But use old Spaced Out Radio.
I got it right up here. I'm gonna put it right there. But go ahead.
Use old Spaced Out Radio and Dave. I love Spaced Out Radio. But he's you know, after each break, he's like, "Welcome back to the show, Roger. Thank you for coming back on the show." And you're like, "I'm still here. Never went nowhere."
Yeah.
It's just little things like that, Roger. But anyways, go ahead, man.
Dave's my guy. But let me take that thought back down here. Sometimes you put them to the side, but yeah. So anyway, I had a problem. I couldn't find anybody. And, you know, it was a challenge, you know, doing this in pretty much. So I ended up, a guy named Alan Stanfield, he helped me a little bit. Then I ended up reaching out to Billy Carson. He said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Then I ended up just finally at this point, all of a sudden I wake up that morning or about 3 days before the show. I had a commitment from Billy Carson, Alan Steinfeld, Barbara Lamb. I had Kathleen Martin on the show. Martin, I had Whitley Strieber.
Wow.
I had Linda Moulton Howe. So I had all these people, and of course that was a debacle right there, because you're talking these headliners, and then I was like, who can go first? And man, they wasn't having it. Everybody was the headliner, and it was just whatever. And all of a sudden, this show went for 4.5 hours. We only had 2 hours. So I've already violated everything, and I was just nervous, and I was like, you know what, the heck with it. This is the best day of my freaking life. I got Linda Moulton Howe, I got Willa Strieber, I got his books back here, they all hear Billy Carr. Okay, fine, let's just go for it. And went in for it, and
went all in.
And probably about 3 weeks later, I get an email that I was one of the winners. I was chosen. And so they gave us like a $5,000 a month contract with producers and everything else to create content for them for what we call season 1. And so, it was called Ufology. And so at that point, I did it. And around about the same exact time, I did my first YouTube video. And it was called 180 Days. That was at that point when we heard that in 180 days they were going to make disclosure. And I did a video. It had about 30 views. And I get a phone call from some people and say, hey, Roderick Martin, we saw you on a video, and we want you to be part of one of our TV shows. And I thought I was being pranked. I was like, okay, it's a prank. It's Tuesday. The hell with that. And so I was like, call me back Friday. And they was like, well, can you talk now? I said, no, call me back Friday. So I knew by this time, and Jay, I was like, you know what? Whoever's pranking me is going to forget, move on to somebody else. 4 days later, they ain't got nothing better else to do. But sure enough, they set up the Zoom call. It was 5 or 6 people, and I couldn't see. Only 2 of them had their faces on. The other 4 didn't. And they just started asking me all these questions. And I'm like, okay, fine. And I'm sitting here with frustration, because I'm like, okay, this is. And the lady says, Roderick, we need you to stop. And I stopped. She said, look into the camera. And I'm looking into the camera. She said, this is real. And I was like, huh? She said, this is real. You're going to be a star. This is real. And I was like, am I that transparent? She's like, yes, you are. Because I'm like, I don't care. I don't know who y'all are, and finally they revealed themselves. And then ultimately it was the Discovery Channel. And so I ended up hosting a show there called Alien Endgame. And so by this time, my Clubhouse thing grew from 5,000 to 20,000. Today it's like 30,000 people in that club. And then I got approached by Fox Tubi, which was a show that was on Fox Tubi from another production company who heard me on Clubhouse. And so they was like, hey, we like you. We like your style, your persona, your charisma, all the things that, of course. And they was like, hey, we want you. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And by that time, I now have I have an agent that I've now signed with at this point, and then entertainment lawyer and all this stuff, because now I'm into my second. But today, I've done about 8 different TV shows on Amazon. Was featured on Ancient Aliens, documentary on Forbidden Knowledge, a couple of Gaia, with George Norrie, in a show with Regina Meredith.
Yep, I saw that one too.
And was featured on Coast to Coast Radio. So it's been a tremendous ride, learning, talking with people who I used to admire on TV and still do admire them, but now they're on my phone, and just having this journey. But all along, we can get to it later, there was a huge discovery that I made, and which has now sent me into a different path. But back to what you're saying, I think it's a beautiful thing doing this. Sometimes, yes, being a one-man show, but because the entertainment industry have embraced me with this, which then let me know if they're doing this, okay, sometimes they pay me a little honorary fee. It's not a lot of money, here and there, but that let me know they're spending money making movies and documentaries. Then how can I make this my business or my day-to-day thing? And that's what the pursuit began the path, and that's where it's going. And I'm sure glad I made that decision. And then, fortunately for me, I'm divorced. Me and that She-Wolf got a divorce, and so my responsibility level went down, and so therefore my risk taking went up, and so it's turned out to be a good risk.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link to the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.
Are you able to talk about some of those endeavors or some of those new things that you've talked to me about? With your channel and things you got coming down the road?
With the channel, yes, we can do that. A couple of things down the road. Hang on one second. Let me stretch my leg here. With the channel, one of the things that I've done is kind of doing a rebrand. And so, I used to always use this term high strangeness, not me, but I think other people may use it. And I thought about it. How does that play into fact of what we're doing? Because currently the name Why the Big Secret, and I'm always looking for the content strategy of researchers, and we're trying to reveal the big thing all the time versus me just talking about stuff that I'm just totally interested in, whether it's conspiracies, whether it's paranormal, whether it's ghosts, whether it's just high strange stuff. And so I initially said, well, I'm going to do my own clothing brand. And what would be a good clothing brand? And so I started exploring that option, and I started saying, hey, well, let's do a clothing brand called High Strangeness. And I said, okay, that's fine. And then ultimately I started thinking about content. And then I put up a 24-hour hotline about 2 months prior to this, and in hopes to get UFO stories. Well, I started getting all kinds of experiences story. I mean, some strange stuff. It wasn't just UFOs. It was paranormals, afterlife, ghosts, and all of this. People calling, leaving this message. And I'm like, Art Bell. I'm an Art Bell fan. I grew up with Art Bell in the audience, and I'm like, this is what you want to do. And so at that point, the epiphany went off, picked up the phone, called the attorneys and said, not just the clothing line. Check and do the research and see if High Strangeness could be my brand. About a week and a half, I get this report, and they went through and said, yeah, you can trademark this brand within the industry of ufology, true crime, paranormal, video podcasting, books, and all of this stuff. This could be your brand. And I was shocked because I would figure, this is a good phrase that we use in the industry. So the opportunity was there. We filed for the U.S. trademark, which was done. Then I came up with my own catchphrase, which is what I use all the time, which you may not believe it. And now that's trademarked within this industry as well. And then, of course, the High Strangeness clothing line has been trademarked. And so Why the Big Secret will switch over to that because it's the future. And then ultimately I started my own entertainment company, production company, where I'm gonna do little mini docs in the future, which is High Strange Entertainment LLC. And so that was one of the things. And then, of course, we can later talk about Project Black, which was a result of all of this UFO stuff and the huge discovery there. But that's where I'm at. And, it's business, but it's also infotainment. It's also fun, and it's also exploration. And that's what I plan to do and begin to shape the content of dealing with all these high strange things out there. And it could be a conspiracy. It could be whatever. But if it's got some strangeness to it, you're going to find it on High Strangeness.
I love it. Something you mentioned earlier about, or we were talking about how, going, relationships and all that, all the ups and downs with
Oh yeah,
researching this stuff and just being part of this community.
Yep.
And I asked Nick Pope last year. I'm trying to find it. I can't find it, but basically, to sum it all up. So I asked him, Nick Pope, it's almost like ever since 2017, since Pentagon came out, December. I was actually that day I interviewed Richard C. Hoagland, and he's like, whatever you had to say, whatever you just want to talk about, scratch it. We're talking about this. I said, yes, sir. But ever since then, there's been a rebrand effect, UAP, I'm all cool about rebranding. I've rebranded my name many a times on this channel. I started out 2010 Cryptic Knowledge Radio.
Okay.
But I feel like they're trying to take control of the narrative, push their own spin on it, taking the old term UFO into UAP. But I wish I could find what I asked them. But to sum it all up, it's almost like I told him, I looked straight in his eyes. So I want an apology because I've been through the pits of hell. It's almost like I want an apology from the government and just everybody else that used to make fun of us, people like me and you and everybody else that's watching this. And because I've been through the pits of hell, I lost one of my best friends because he thought I was a nut job that I grew up with. Told my mother when I was, I don't know, probably 06, told my 07. He told my mother that he believes in aliens and all that, and he's gonna go to hell and all that. And man, I've been through a lot on the search for truth and understanding with the paranormal, even conspiracies, and he looked straight at me, but that's just to sum it all up. I broke it down a lot better than that. He looked straight at me, Roger. He says, governments do not do apologies, but he didn't say anything about other people too that used to make fun of us that are, since the government's talking about it, it's okay. It's normal. I know I may sound bitter. I know that. And some of that is the ego side talking. But man, I've been not just me, us in this community, we've been through a lot of shit if you've been doing this for, been researching into UFOs and paranormal and even conspiracies before 2017. But since 2017 onward, it's normal, like I know, you see what I'm saying, Roger?
Now, what you're saying and what you want, and I said it before, that disclosure is vindication for a lot of people, especially people who were told that they were crazy, who were told that all this UFO stuff is just out the window. And for example, Linda Moulton Howe, when I first was getting her to the show and she heard that the name was ufology, she gave me a backstory and she said, I really don't like the term. I really don't, like it. And she told me because in the history back then, ufology was a word that the government came up with, is what she said, to identify the crazies. And they'll walk up to somebody and say, oh, this guy's into ufology or ufologist or whatever. And it was a code word for them telling the other person he's cuckoo or whatever, he's crazy. And Stanton Freeman, who is now no longer with us, is one of the godfathers of this thing too, told her, no, we need to embrace the terminology. It is identifying what we do and who we are. Let's embrace it. Okay, so that's your first part of the shift of people beginning to say, okay, what we do has a name, it has identity, and hence today we call it ufology. We are ufologists in all of those things. On a personal note, what you're dealt with, especially when you hear the word demons. Okay, so when I was on Clubhouse, I would interview tons of people, and I started noticing there was a trend. Some people say angels and demons. Some people say this and blah, blah, blah. And it all began to kind of focus on particular what their religious background was, whether it was Catholic, whether it was Baptist, and whether it was Buddhism, or whether it was Muslim, and all of these things, and which then brings into why we get the opinions, or people would think how they see the phenomena. And so when you probably was growing up and when you're probably dealing with your friends, you have to understand, and so much for them's sake, is that they're not talking against you because it's something more powerful that was pushing those narratives. You were just the collateral damage, but it was something mental where that friend of yours could not handle the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or could not handle, because it was, remember the whole saying biblically, raise a child, blah, blah, blah. He's going to be raised by this way, raise up a child the way you want. So and it's no different than a circus elephant. Catch a baby elephant, tie him up with a rope when he was a kid. He's pulling on it, pulling on it, pulling on it, and he gets to a point where he cannot think this is unbreakable. Now, when it's a full-grown, massive elephant with world strength, they chain it up with a rope, and it doesn't tug on it because it's been mentally trained that rope is not breakable. And yet now it could just snap it if it wanted to, but it doesn't. So people are raised that way. They're seeing the phenomena this way. And so it's very difficult people to bridge that gap. Okay, so now the government on one hand today is playing a whole different game. So I tell people all the time, the game of disclosure will never go away. I don't care what people think. Well, we're about to hear about it, we're going to do. They're just going to change the rules. The rules will change, and they're going to give us what we think we want. And they're going to stay a step ahead of us like they've already been. So we've spent the last 60 years, and I'll tie all this together and land this spaceship, not a plane. But we spent so much time telling the public, don't believe the government. They lie, lie, lie. And they did good about it. Now, all of a sudden, they're trying to tell the truth. And then we want to tell friends, you believe them? And they're like, nah, we don't believe them. They still ain't no aliens out there. I don't care what the government said. The government can't be trusted. They got a reason for that. So it's only because we've done so much of doing it, and they know it. So today, most of the people who believe, who lost something behind it, people like yourself who endured this insanable, discussions and rejection and all of this stuff, because
I don't want to play the victim card at all.
Well,
It's not just me. It's a lot of us endured a lot through this.
That's my point. And like I said, so let me bag it up. Then and again, it's not just you; it's all of us. We always told we was crazy.
Yes.
Oh, we all are. And now the proof is there, and the vindication part now is laughing at people who can't handle the truth, mentally and not prepared for it, because something is coming. It's going to be a big reveal someday. And I don't know when, but it's happening. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that's not going to be that way. Now, let's move you and I out of this picture for a minute. What big discovery did I make when I started doing Clubhouse and 400 interviews? I did over 400 people in 2 or 3 years there, because sometimes you have 5 up there at a time and all of this. But I started noticing there was a huge gap in the Black community when it came down to talking about UFOs, aliens. So nevertheless, ridiculed of that. We're talking about a whole community of people that is just not having it. It's taboo. We're not even talking about it, right? My mom, who, bless her soul, is 70-something years old. Last Thanksgiving or 2 Thanksgiving, I had a book that I was reading, had a big alien head on the front of the book, and it was in front of the microwave on Thanksgiving, and she would not go near the microwave and do anything. She just stood there in a trance and just kept saying, move the book. And I thought it was a joke for a moment, because come on, Mom, hand it to me and I'll put it over here. She just wasn't having it, and mentally could not grasp that there's an alien, and I'm talking about these aliens, and I'm reading, and I realized it for a moment. This is real for her. It's real for a lot of people. And so we have to begin to flip the script of being the victim or the ridicule side and take pride in that we know something they don't know. Mm-hmm. Take pride that we are early on a game that is now being unfolded right before their eyes. Take pride that our senses was taking us further than what most people could fathom. Take pride in knowing that we understand what is happening and not just caught up into the matrix that most people are working in and who can care less what happens every day, that we understand it in that gift, but now is a responsibility for us to enlighten people. And so that's how I would look at it. And then, I'll discuss Project Black in a little bit as we go down that road. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's about, just own it. Just take pride in it. And even all the years of struggle that we went through in the community, I'm sure, especially those who probably took it more seriously, probably had more than others, But yeah, man, I even whenever people make fun of you, man, it's like, man, but in my mind, I'm like, man, I've interviewed Stanton Freeman several times in person, Lyndon Moulton Howe a few times in person, been to Nick Redfern's apartment there in Arlington several times in person. It's like, and that's just a few. I've done a lot of, and just to know that I'm doing the right thing, to me, in my heart, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's fun. I love doing what I do. Just chatting with these people, these OGs that's been around the game for a while. But I know I'm doing the right thing and just trying to get as much information as I can, while, a lot of these, like Lynn Moulton Howe, she's still going strong. She's in her 80s. She's still going strong. But, we don't have people like Stanton Freeman no more. You know what I mean? And with a lot of people that I interviewed Jesse Marcel Jr. before he passed. A lot of these people, they come and go, and I find it a badge of honor, I guess, to try to pick their brains, and but I guess to move forward, Roderick, what is, because you brought up disclosure, I did too, but so what's going on in DC, man? Like, what's going on with all this? I see one side, the skeptical side, I see a psyop, because I'm always just like our posters. I want to believe, I want to believe, but I do believe that there's a lot of bullshit out there too, that people are trying to push their own spin and their own narrative behind the scenes, but I can't seem to wrap my head exactly what's going on. Is it for real or what?
Well, you have to think linear time. We have the changing of the guards. Okay. You have a lot of younger people that were young, that was fascinated by the story, that is now is part of the new government or government places within our government. So they're a little more curious. They want to know what they're signing off this $200 million going down for some toilet seats and all this stuff. Why are we spending so much money? This black ops stuff. Then you have, it's a digital age, more photograph. The phenomena is being more seen. More people are asking questions. It's hard to control media like it was in the 40s, where they can just change a story from a flying saucer to a weather balloon within 24 hours and people believe it.
Or swamp gas.
Yeah, swamp gas. You know what I'm saying? So the times are changing and people are asking more questions. Military technology is growing and the appetite for that is getting incredibly. So all of the things are moving this phenomena down this tube of timeline that's presented. But when we go back to disclosure, just like we thought, we're getting ready, they're going to tell us this. And I try to tell people, you got to understand how information works. If there's 10 doors and we go and knock on a door and say, y'all need to open up 1, 2, and 3, we know something is back there. Then sometimes that's what they give us. It's the other 7 that we think they're going to volunteer and say, oh, by the way, y'all didn't ask for what's through 4 through 10. Come and look at what we got in here, guys. Come on. They're not doing that. And they're not going to ever do that. So we're going to only know what we know to ask and understand. And long as they're controlling the what we call the cabals or whatever they want to call it, things that are operating a little above the government. And we can think of the presidency. Everybody think if somebody's running for president this year and say, oh, I'm going to open all the Area 151 files and I'm going to talk about UFOs if you elect me. How many people are going to do that? I'm not, because I know you ain't got nothing to do with a new president. Them generals that's been there 30 years is controlling that stuff. They're not listening to you. You temporary. They know the office is temporary. That's why they're not read into all these black op programs anyway. So the game of disclosure is tight, and it's really tight. But do we really want disclosure, MJ? Do we really want disclosure? And let me give the audience an example. Do you really want this, though? Imagine getting off a freaking airplane. You just got off the airplane, and there was a little turbulence, but you just got off, and they hand you a brochure and say, because you want disclosure, that turbulence that you fell up there, it was a UAP that flew by. Oh, yeah, it turned off our instrument panels, but with the skill set of ninja skills of our pilot, we didn't crash, right? Who's getting back on the next plane? You get what I'm saying? And who's going to do that? Do we really want that type of information? Oh, by the way, MJ, the Johnsons down there, I know that grass is tall and it's kind of ticking you off, but we found out through disclosure, through the homeowners association, that they got abducted last week. That's why he haven't cut the grass. But hopefully he comes back. Do you want to know that? You know what I'm saying? Is this the disclosure that we truly want? We
You're
want
talking about the human race as a collective, because people like you and I and others watching, we're part of the minority.
There you go. But what I'm saying is, but you and I are still part of a minority, but we also sit at the top of a loft of a lot of truth seekers who are still a little different because they want to know. And so do we want that kind of information out there? Because, all right, let me give you another example. We never seen a UFO stop for gas. They never have. Obviously, they got some technology of free energy. Could you imagine what would happen if free energy hit the marketplace tomorrow? As society as we know it would crash globally. There's war still being fought, but they're not stopped buying oil from each other. They're not doing that. Nobody's that stupid. You get what I'm saying? They're going to still. And so the world still goes around this information. So, and you can, and let's look at it from the ET standpoint. Imagine that, and I have so many stories that I could tell, anecdotes, right? But the whole point I'm saying is, imagine all of a sudden a alien shows up, and you and I'm gonna use you and I, okay? Tomorrow, somebody called us and said, "This is you, MJ. This is you and Roderick's lucky day. You guys are going to change your family's life for history. I'm going to place you both on the board of the highest petroleum company in the world, Exxon or whatever. And you broke today, but in a few weeks, you and your wife, your 1-year-old is going to be worth billions. And Roderick, you and your family is going to be worth billions but our first day at the board meeting, before we became rich, an alien walks in named Akbach. And he walks to the board meeting and he hands us a piece of paper for free energy. Now, on this side of the room, we got people that's been billionaires for years. They're 80 years old. They got to live a good life. They want to leave a legacy. They okay. They can leave money and a legacy. So, they clapping. But you and I clapping because free energy for a minute. And then I whisper and say, MJ, wait a minute. We're going to still be broke. We're going to still be broke. He finna give free energy next week.
Right.
You're going to look at me. I'm looking at you. The old folks are clapping because they finna leave their legacy behind. And I'm going to look over at the security guard and I'm going to tell him to lock the door. Akbach ain't getting out of there alive. Why? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you think if that's not happening for these aliens that's coming to save the world and giving us technology that's going to change people's financial lives, these billionaires and trillionaires, if there's any, and you think they're going to let them live or do that, right? And then way back on planet Xeon, they're having a meeting and they're clapping, and somebody said, we're going to go save these Earthlings until one of them raises. And said, what happened to Akbach? We sent him 3 weeks ago. And he go, well, they killed him. How many more aliens coming to save us? You get what I'm saying? That ain't happening. So that could be happening as a possibility behind the scenes. You know what I'm saying? And
they also killed that JFK guy.
There you go. He was about to tell the truth. These humans are just barbarian. They just barbaric. They don't. And so the world says just leave them alone. Let them do what they do. So it's so many factors that we push for and what we think is happening. Because the truth of the matter is, if the extraterrestrials wanted us to know, now we do say that they're higher intelligence. So if they are highly intelligent, then they should already know what would happen if they revealed themselves in a more lightened way.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to disturb our whole ecosystem of life and just pop up and jump out and say, hey, we here. So you got all of these variables that we're shooting for, and not just one extraterrestrial, and we can go for even more. So now we got whistleblowers. We have governments trying to protect whistleblowers, and they're still government officials. So they hear it and they took an oath to protect the United States of America. So the whistleblower can't tell so much stuff that we think they're going to tell. And so you got all of these moving parts. And then I'm shocked because you watched it. You watched David Rush, right? Give his testimony. The only thing I'm shocked at that nobody's really paid attention to is when he, not about all the hoopla of the spacecraft that the government has retrieved, and we got all this. Okay, I'm past that point. We've been knowing that since the Roswell stuff. I'm concerned about when he said we found abandoned spacecraft. Okay. Imagine going out front of your house right now and there's an abandoned car, not crashed, parked in your driveway. You're going to put the kid down. You're going to put the wife up and say, let me get a gun. Something is on the loose. I don't know where it is, but the car is out front. They abandoned it. We're not asking who's walking among us. How come we're not searching for who abandoned the spaceships? That's my thought.
Well said, man. Just like I said, man, you bring a lot of charisma to the table. You're just fun to listen to, Roger. But
I appreciate it.
But well, quickly on David, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on him. But do you think he's legit? He seems legit, but there's always that skeptical mind,
At first, for a moment, I laughed because he didn't, we made a big deal and he didn't tell us nothing. And then he testified right there. He hadn't seen anything firsthand, that everything was hearsay to him, but he knows people. But as this thing unfolds, as more and more people are coming forward, and then his stories and everything else, I think that he was in the room. And when I say in the room, could have been just saw some papers or pretty much. So he's saying what he's saying, and he's really traumatized by the reaction that he's getting. But we need that to snowball the facts, because before him, who was it? Lou Elizondo. And he was my hero, because you got two factions. You got the benevolent and malevolent side. Either they come in peace or they come in to the threat narrative. And Lou was more the threat narrative. So CE5, Dr. Grill is more the, friendly, benevolent side, right? And so Lou was the one who came out, and they ate him up. They ate him up literally, right? And even I, at some point, because we don't care. And I think let's do it this way. As well as I know, for me and you, the only people we want to hear is the one who says the aliens are at 2300 Jackson Street. Let's go over there. We want that kind of information.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to hear none of this speculative stuff. I mean, I'm far beyond crashes. I don't care. Mm-hmm. And I don't say that to my audience because we need to go deeper. I don't care. I'm past that point. I believe the Roswell incident. I believe the many times we find flying saucers. This is 60 years ago stories. So what they're saying, and even the disclosure today, everybody's coming forward with, but we want to know who the shapeshifters are. We want to know, what they really look like, what they want, who is their God, where they come from, and we want more.
Where do we come from?
All right, well then we can get into that. You don't want to talk about that. You want? I get some stuff on that.
My
Doing some research.
well, this ain't gonna be the first time you're gonna be here either. So
Yeah. Okay.
I may put that right here, just like you did. You know,
put it right there because
I'm gonna hold it. I'm gonna hold it
right there because we gonna go scripture when that time. Because I can tell them scriptures that tells us what we need to know.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link of the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.